Thank you for joining us once again. This is Gods, Demons, and Magic. I'm your host, Sri Sachinandana Das, and today we'll continue our exploration of astrology, as mentioned by Iamblichus in his work, The Egyptian Mysteries.
And I want to talk a little bit about what is astrology. And of course, it's believed by many people that there is one overarching system of astrology, just like many believe there was one overarching system of mysticism or religion or yoga, that then, over time sort of branched off into many different systems and according to the different cultures and languages throughout time. So similarly, many believe that there was one broader system of astrology, and over time, that system of astrology has sort of, broken up into East and West with all sorts of different opinions about how to calculate things, how to cast charts, how to interpret charts. And Iamblichus himself asks this about this. He basically, when he's asking about astrology, he asks, does it really work? Like, can it be true? Because there's so many different opinions about how charts are cast, and this creates doubts within Iamblichus or Porphyry. All the different astrologers, they all have different ways of interpreting things and saying things. So how can this be real? How can it work? So he asks about this. And this is still, something that exists today, right? These are still very serious doubts. So the way that astrology works is essentially what you're looking at is the divine power of the sun. And of course the sun in many different cultures is considered a manifestation of the divine. In ancient Egypt, they looked upon the sun as if it was the soul of the universe. That you had the universe itself as sort of like a giant body. Just as you have your own body, which is really, if you were to somehow able to sit within your own body and sort of look upwards in a mystical way or supernatural way towards the soul, and you see the soul like a glowing spark there. It's actually situated within the chest and by the heart chakra. Like you have the soul situated within your body, shining out brilliantly and with the power of consciousness and providing life itself, sustaining the body itself, illuminating the body. And so the ancient Egyptians would look into the sky and they'd see that spark, the eye of Ra, and they would see this divine being who's essentially the soul of the universe. And that light of the sun is shining out and sustaining the universe. It's the very source of life force in the universe. And you'll see also within the ancient Vedic literatures, it's the same thing. Yashchakshud Esha Sabata Sakala Gudahanam. It's considered the eye of God, essentially. And it's also considered, it mentions also in the Bhagavad Gita, that it's like in the same way that the sun is illuminating the entire universe with light, and the same way the soul is illuminating the body by consciousness. So you see this very similar concept, almost identical. And what's also interesting between these two cultures is that within the ancient Egyptian culture, the supreme god, or the one transcendent god who's beyond nature, is known as Amun. And so Amun is beyond nature, and yet nature itself was considered his energy or his power, and all the various gods were considered, at least at one time, to be expansions of Amun. And then one of the greatest expansions or powers of Amun that are invested within nature, which we can all experience and look towards with reverence and awe, is the sun itself. The sun being an extremely powerful manifestation of Amun, who's transcendental to nature. And therefore you have Amun-Ra, who is the sun god, as a representative of Amun, or Ra, is a powerful manifestation of Amun within the world. And you'll see this also within the Vedic tradition. You have Surya, who's the sun god, and then you have Narayan, who is essentially like Amun. He's the absolute one supreme transcendent god beyond matter, and yet matter is within him. And all the various gods of the Vedic pantheon are simply his powers and his energies. And especially the sun is seen as a manifestation directly of this supreme source of creation. And it's through the sun that then Narayan is essentially sustaining the entire universe. Raja Samasta Sudamurtir Ashesha Teja. So the sun is described as having unlimited power and effulgence, and it never diminishes, although it continues to give and give and give. And so this way the sun is seen as a symbol of the the absolute truth, and that it's constantly emanating power and energy, and yet it never diminishes, it never loses anything by constantly giving. And it's considered the king of all planets. And so you have the sun as this sort of divine presence within this world of that which transcends the world, the absolute supreme divinity. And then the life and the power from the sun is essentially shining throughout the entire universe. And that light is then bouncing off all the various objects. And it's hitting you. It's hitting you in your physical body, of course, and giving you a suntan. And it's also hitting you in your subtle body or your astral body. And, it has a powerful effect on your astral body. And of course, the ancient Egyptians, they considered the sun to be, a very powerful force that moves not only through this physical realm of existence, but it also shines throughout the underworld. And so you have the sun essentially affecting all manner of creation in this powerful way. And as the sun's divine rays bounce around the universe, for example, they'll shine against Jupiter. And then those rays will bounce off Jupiter and hit you. And so it's like the rays of the sun become colored by Jupiter, or his qualities, which are ultimately qualities of the absolute Godhead or absolute truth. And so you have the Jupiter qualities, the light bouncing off of Jupiter onto you, the light bouncing off of Saturn, bouncing off of Venus. And you'll have the light bouncing from Venus to Jupiter, then to you, or from Saturn to Jupiter, then to you. So you have this kind of extremely complex interplay of the rays of the sun sort of bouncing around the universe and creating a web. And you're sort of caught in that web. Your subtle body is influenced by that web of light. And therefore, in the Vedic tradition, astrology is known as Jyotish, or the science of light. You're essentially how you're affected by light, meaning the light of the sun as it refracts and bends and bounces throughout the universe. And then you have within astrology the various sign positions, like the zodiac, which is consistent all throughout. Whether you go to Egypt, or you go to Babylon and Persia, or you go to ancient India, you'll see that there's a system of what are called, zodiac signs or rasis. And so these particular signs, usually especially within the ancient Vedic texts, they'll always begin with creation itself. Before even discussing astrology, they'll talk about, the Supreme Lord, as we mentioned, the source of everything, the source of creation. And they'll talk about the history of creation itself and the various levels of creation. And then it will come to the point of, the creation of the planets and everything like that. And the idea is really to show that these planets and these zodiac signs and the houses and everything are essentially qualities of the absolute truth manifest into the world. So everything that one finds as qualities of Jupiter, or qualities of Venus, or qualities of Libra, or qualities of Sagittarius, then these particular signs and planets, they're actually simply manifesting one particular bundle of qualities of God, or the absolute truth. And it's much the same way that, say, for example, Punyagandha Pratibhyamcha, the scent of the earth. This from ancient Indian texts. Describe the scent of the earth. All the scents that are within all the various flowers, they're actually present within the earth. It's sort of like the repository of all scents. And yet one particular flower, the rose, for example, is actually drawing from that reservoir of scents and pulling out that delicious smell of the rose and then manifesting it through its flower. And so the rose flower is there, sort of in a larger way within the earth, but it's being strained into one particular flower. And so in the same way, Jupiter is taking the qualities of God and straining out one particular quality of God and sort of bringing that to the forefront. And so as these various qualities, they essentially, they sort of shine down upon you in these very complex, as we said, webbing of solar rays, manifest these qualities within you, or within your physical or material embodied condition. You're sort of being rained down upon by these divine qualities. And they really fill you with who you are as a person, what your conditioned existence is within this world. And then, of course, you have the house system, without going into too much complexity, but it's basically how those qualities then manifest and physical reality in your life, in your day-to-day existence, how they become concrete and very real experiences to you in your life. And so again, in order to be able to read these particular qualities, essentially what you're looking at is a very complex system of patterns. When you're drawing an astrological chart, you're looking at a very complex layer upon layer upon layer of patterns. And so you have to be, first of all, very intelligent to be able to read it. Just like IQ tests are oftentimes based on pattern recognition. So you have to have a high IQ to be able to look into these charts and recognize patterns. And traditionally, in order to cast astrological charts, you had to make them by hand without computer, help, the help of astrological software. So you had to actually be mathematically capable, and therefore only the priests were considered qualified as astrologers because they were educated in that way. Similarly, you had to be, it's very interesting that astrology as a priestly activity, you had to be selfless. In order to properly do astrology, you essentially have to be doing it for free. Of course, astrologers can take donations, but for the most part, you have to be doing it motivated by a desire to help that person without any selfish personal desire. You want something from them. You want money, you want power, you want prestige, or anything like that. It has to be as a service. Just like a traditional doctor would simply be, the best doctor is one that's doing it for free, really. Like if you have somebody that goes to an emergency like a hurricane or there's an earthquake and you have like Doctors Without Borders or something, they go in order simply to help and they're not being paid or anything. And they simply go there to help. They really put their feelings and they're motivated. Their motivations are pure, and therefore you'll see that miracles can happen. They can really rise to the highest level of their art because their motivation is pure. So astrology is the same thing. It's supposed to be done simply as a service. And then the astrologer may accept whatever is given in return, but it's really just meant to be an act of compassion for others. And when one is selfless like that, then one is essentially becomes empowered by the divine, by the gods, or by the planets themselves, who are considered gods, and who are arranging these various things. They'll give you the power to actually recognize the patterns, because these patterns are practically limitless. But by looking into them with the right consciousness, and also through meditation, through chanting mantras, through purifying oneself internally, and keeping oneself pure in habits externally, then if you're in really good consciousness and you look at the chart, then you'll, in essence, be blessed, and the proper patterns will jump out at you. You'll be able to see exactly what that individual is meant to hear. And of course, one also has to practice, by reading astrological charts again and again and again. Then the ancient astrologer would develop the ability also. They would fine-tune their intuition and be able to see things by experience. So all of these things are very important. And just one final thing I would like to mention about this oracle and divination practice of astrology is that also Porphyry asks, he asks a little bit later on, that how can one see one's guardian angel or daemon through astrology? So apparently at that time there was a practice by which one could look into a chart and tell someone, oh, this is the god that you should worship, or this is the angel or the guardian spirit that is protecting you, therefore you should, do rituals for to make this particular god or protector happy. And it's very interesting because there still exists today within Jaimini Astrology, which is a very ancient system of Vedic or Indian astrology. This particular practice still exists to this day. In fact, within Jaimini Astrology, there's two different deities that one can see in one's chart. There is a kind of guardian spirit, sort of what Porphyry is asking about, which will help you materially. It's like who you can go to ask for material benefits, or it's advising. This particular deity represented by a particular planet or planets will indicate, that this particular deity is interested in helping you in your material life. Whereas there's another position or combination of planets, which is more spiritual. It's called your Ishtadev, by which one sees what particular deity one should worship on the path of liberation or on the path of yoga or freeing oneself from samsara or material existence or the cycle of karma. And what that shows is generally in past lives one has worshipped this particular deity, and therefore that deity is very favorably inclined and merciful, and therefore one can approach that deity and ask for blessings, and that deity will sort of open the pathway of liberation.
In the yoga texts of ancient India, such as the Bhagavad Gita, very clearly present certain rules and laws regarding reincarnation. In fact, one of the major goals of those texts is to cease the process of reincarnation or cease the process of rebirth or samsara and attain liberation from existence itself. And therefore the time of death is a very important time for the yogi. It's when the rubber meets the road, so to speak, and all of the spiritual practice that one has cultivated throughout life is tested. And one rule is essentially whatever the condition of your mind is at the time of death, it'll drive you into your next body. So the condition of your subtle body will then attract a new set of senses, a new set of eyes, a new set of ears, a new tongue, which are more in alignment with your mind as it is, as you've conditioned it throughout your life, and as it exists at the time of death. So in a sense, everything that we think about, everything that we meditate upon, everything, the way in which we sculpt our mind and our feelings and our emotions, that's essentially preparing the next body that we'll receive. And then for the yogi, therefore, will sort of condition or purify the mind and shape the mind in such a way that at the time of death, it doesn't attract a new body. Rather, the yogi will try to attain liberation or freedom from material existence, moving beyond material reality, attaining transcendence, enlightenment, freedom from samsara. So just as if you're driving a car, you're going to have your GPS on or something like that, and you're making a very deliberate effort to go in a particular direction so that you'll attain a destination. Like you're driving across country, you're very clearly aiming towards your destination. You're making choices left or right, etc., on how you're going to follow the roads in order to get there. So for the practitioner of yoga or spiritual life, when one is trying to attain liberation, one is very clearly making choices in their life that go towards that destination. And as they approach closer and closer and closer, the mind becomes more and more focused in meditation and more pinpointed on the absolute truth. And so this is a process the yogi uses to prepare themselves for liberation, but that process can also be used to attain material destinations as well. And it's true that if you really want to attain success in something or you want to achieve something in the material world, you really have to focus your mind on it. And the more intensely you're focused on it, the more successful you'll be. If you're a businessman, the most successful businessmen are those who wake up and before they brush their teeth, they're checking their phone. They go to work. They don't just clock in 9 to 5. Rather, they work from the time they get up to the time they go to bed, and they're obsessed with their business, and they're constantly thinking about their business. So for them, that's actually, that's a kind of meditation, and that intensity of meditation results in a successful business. Now, if you're a materialist who works sort of on the mystical platform, such as maybe a worshiper of gods or a magician, then you're going to use your mind in the same way to really focus on a particular deity. And then if you worship that particular deity and engross yourself in that deity and serve that particular deity, then at the time of death, you'll go to that deity. You'll actually take birth in the realm of that particular god. And so in addition to showing which deities is one naturally inclined to or karmically connected to that will fulfill one's material desires or sort of behave as a daemon or guardian angel that will protect an individual and try to provide for them, Jaimini Astrology will also show which deity is one karmically inclined to worship and to absorb one's mind in, so that at the time of death, one will actually go to the abode of that particular deity, will take birth in their dimension, or could even show one's proclivity for total liberation from material existence, through the path of yoga or mystic union. And in the next episode, we'll continue the discussion by talking about the invocation of theurgic powers through sacrifice and prayer. How does one actually focus the mind on a particular deity? What are the various rituals which are created to assist that? So thank you very much for listening. If you found value in this, please like and subscribe. If you're listening on iTunes, please visit srisachinandana.com/iTunes and leave a positive review. Thank you again, and we hope you will join us next time on Gods, Demons, and Magic.